and welcome to In the Days of Noor with me, Noor, where we talk about Islamic-related topics and social issues. This episode of In the Days of Noor was recorded live on Facebook Live. That's facebook.com/inthedaysofnoor and facebook.com/Noor Al-Qudus. Today, our guest is Michael Sanford, talking about traditional marriage versus modern marriage. Enjoy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're just gonna add Michael here, inshallah, and hopefully we can begin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All we're just waiting for Michael to join us, inshallah. Oh, alhamdulillah, that's excellent. It's side by side, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So, okay, I'm just seeing. All right, alhamdulillah, no feedback. Okay, so we wanted to talk about traditional marriage versus modern marriage. Michael, if you wanted to begin, inshallah, and then, yeah, if you wanted to begin.
Yeah, so I'll give an introduction about myself first. So, my name is Michael Sanford, and so thanks for having me on.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for
Yeah, I'll do it. So, my name is Michael Sanford, originally from Chicago. I'm in my late 40s now. I moved to Washington, D.C. in the 90s, in 95, and then after about a few months of studying different religions on my own, going through some hard times, I decided to look into Islam among other religions. I became Muslim in 96, and then I got married in 99, and I had a son, and so I have a teenage son now. And I'm a software engineer by trade. Started a few software entrepreneur as well. Started a couple companies, and then moved to after DC or after my first marriage lasted about 4 years. Got divorced. A few years later, got remarried. That lasted a little bit more than 4 years. Got divorced, and then that ended about 3.5 years ago. And really, since then, it's been a journey about trying to figure out what the heck went wrong and why this was happening. So that's how I got started on this journey about relationships and gender roles and masculinity and femininity, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, alhamdulillah, and that's good to take that path after getting divorced or trying to figure out what you did wrong instead of just what the other person did wrong or circumstances. So that's, alhamdulillah, that's beneficial, and hopefully not just for yourself, but for everyone listening and for people around you who you're advising. So I know we did want to start out with trying to give some definitions, as some people already asked before the broadcast, well, what is a traditional marriage? And some people had different definitions of that. So do we want to start? No, actually, we wanted to start with the definition of what is a good spouse? What do we think of as a good spouse for a husband and wife, and then go into traditional marriage? So you had a really good list, a really good definition of both, and I'd like you all to chime in as well as to what do you feel, what is the definition of a good husband, a good wife? So Michael, if you could give us your definition, inshallah.
Sure. Hold on, let me bring up my notes here.
Sure.
Right. So just so that people watching know, so Nordine and I, we came up with this, and we agreed that we would come in with agreement about what a definition is and expectations are. And so there was a little bit of a disagreement, but regardless, here's what we have for a good husband: provide, protect, and lead his wife to be the best version of herself, spiritually, meaning deen, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and financially. Lead by example to be the best version of himself. Ensure his wife lives in an environment where she feels safe, secure, and loved. And then for expectations for a husband, financial responsible for wife and children, build environment for spiritual growth and improving dean for wife and himself, provides interesting and exciting experiences for her that she wants, and shows gratitude to wife.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I think that, well, you guys can let us know in the comments if you agree with that. So, but just as a starting point, that's what we both kind of agreed on were the expectations that people have of what a good spouse is, and maybe just what a good spouse is in a general sense. So let me just say assalamu alaikum to Taulia, and I think I saw Jermaine here. Saeed, assalamu alaikum. So assalamu alaikum to everyone. Jermaine said he agrees. Okay, alhamdulillah. And if you think of something else, let us know. But yeah, so we can start out with that basic definition of what we think a good spouse is, and then try to see where does that fit in this conversation of a modern versus traditional marriage, and maybe what has the ability to provide that um, more than the other, or maybe they're equal, or maybe one is better for some things and the other is better for other things. Walaikum assalam, Zainab. So, in thinking of those definitions, then we want to go into the definition of a modern marriage and a traditional marriage. So, just from some of the notes from what we discussed, then at least I'll define the modern marriage part that we
Hey,
said.
Nordy.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
just so we did good husband. Do you want to read
Oh,
what we talked about for good wife?
oh wow. Okay. For some reason I thought we did both. Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did husband. Why don't you do wife?
Okay.
Or do you want me to read it? I don't know if you have the notes in front of you.
Yes, please do. Sorry.
All right, all right. So for good wife, we have provide a home environment for her husband that strengthens and encourages him fulfilling his responsibilities and noble goals. Ensure her husband feels respected, be trustworthy with finances and companionship.
Mhm.
Expectations, good sex, good food, good words in terms of being honest, respectful, positive most of the time. Everybody has bad days. And providing a good home, in other words, a clean household.
Mhm. Okay, so did we say that that was our definition of a good wife, but are we also saying that those are the expectations that men have of what a good wife is?
So, yeah, so I'll take a stab at that. So, so like I talked about 3.5 years ago when I started this journey about relationships. I talk to a lot of men. Like I get this call every now and then saying, Mike, sorry, but I know you've gone through this a couple times, and I was wondering if you could help my cousin, my brother, etc. And there was definitely a common theme among the guys that I talked to, and I would have to say, like, I think what we articulated for a good wife would be that would be that would be a touchdown for a lot of guys.
Okay. Yeah, and we spoke about, I don't know if we'll get to this later or I just want to mention it now, but we spoke about the fact that some of these expectations that either men have of women or women have of men, they don't necessarily have of themselves, and that can sometimes be part of the conflict. So in that list, if some of the women here can answer, or some of the men from the list we made for husbands, if what is expected or what we said to be a good husband or a good wife, if you came into your marriage with that idea of yourself. So if we're saying that one of the things that would make a good wife is a home cooked meal, is that what women are coming into marriage believing themselves to be responsible for, or not? So I'd love to hear from you all in the comments, but we can move to defining modern marriage, right? Yeah. Okay. So we said that a modern marriage would be defined as equitable, flexible, that there's an emphasis on sameness, that, and I think Mike wants to get into this a bit more, but that the man is very accommodating to the woman. He's not necessarily taking on the leadership role. And so those were some of the things we said for modern marriage, and we can get into traditional marriage. But what were some of the, do you want to add to that definition? And then what were some of the critiques that you had of modern marriage?
Yeah, so we talked briefly, Nardine, yesterday about this, right? And so one of the things that was interesting that came up when we discussed this was, about kind of in this 50-50 role and how that works in terms of leadership. Like originally it was, we talked about, well, that's just with finances, but then where does it go beyond that? Where does, and then we had this conversation about, well, what if the woman then makes more? And then
Right.
because her paycheck on the W-2 is higher than the man's, does that mean that she takes the leadership role? And one of the things that's happened on this journey of mine is I've gone from being an advocate of modern marriages to being very much of a traditionalist. And and one of the reasons that is because just with the gender roles, men having, studies have shown that women, they marry across and up in social
Yeah.
status, right? And men marries down. And so when the woman, I'm talking about like in a romantic relationship, a marriage,
Yeah.
where the woman is constantly leading, studies have shown that she becomes unhappier. She feels like the husband is holding her back.
Yeah.
And and so, you know, that's where, defining leadership based on last paycheck, I find problematic.
Right. Yeah. And we spoke about that and about um, that to me, mm, the issue was maybe not in part, yes, how much money both of them make, but also that part of the issue was who was paying for what. That there could be a scenario where the woman makes more money, but the man is still um, in charge of finances, and that in my view, then he would still be the leader. Whereas um, if they were splitting things equally, then he would not be the leader. Then they're essentially making things together and have making decisions together and have more of an equitable marriage. So I feel like it's less about it's less about the paycheck and more about who is paying for their life. And even that can still get tricky though, because if the woman knows she's making more, so she knows that she can afford a better lifestyle, even if he is paying for everything, then they can still run into problems.
So, right. So when you say that, so let's just take that hypothetical for a moment, right? When you say that, right, the woman is making more, maybe significantly more than the man, but the man is still making the financial decisions.
Yeah.
So, and so are you saying that hypothetically, or have you seen that actually work?
Have I seen it work? I have heard of it working.
Okay.
I don't think that's the normal circumstance. Okay, with the woman making more money, the man making less, and he's still paying the bills. I've only heard of that being the case once, and I felt like in this case, it was maybe more possible. Like if it's a case where a woman, she was doing some kind of side business, she was like an entrepreneur, she started
Hmm.
a podcast, she wrote a book or something, and then it just happened to sell a lot, and she happened to become a millionaire. I feel like that's a bit of a different dynamic than if she just worked harder than him. I feel like most
Hmm.
women would probably have an issue if she felt like, no, I just worked harder than you, and that's why I'm making more money. I think that would lead to a lot of difficulties.
Right. I would agree with that. I think it's a difficult scenario where, where the wife making more money, it's hard for me to imagine how that is going to be a cohesive, healthy relationship where she's working harder, making more money, and he's making the decisions. If like, so for example, if they say, oh, we're going to live in a smaller house, and it's obviously natural, understandable, reasonable, um, and even more importantly, happens
Hmm.
frequently where she would say, uh, no, I'm earning this money. I'm working hard. I want the nicer car. I want the bigger
Oh,
house. I want this for our children. And I just find that dynamic not workable. You know, you know, women have this,
yeah.
uh, yeah, like when I've like in when I've talked to a lot of guys, the problem is they're very when they're in a situation where their relationship where they're constantly like seeking approval or trying to please their wives constantly, and what happens is, and so like just even in the scenario where
Hmm.
he says, well, okay, well, if that's what you really want, we'll do it. You
Hmm.
know, a woman, what we talked about, a woman being respectful to a man, ultimately she can have good manners and she could have good edheb, but at the end of the day, if she's not authentic about that respect, it's
Yes.
not going to happen, and long term it's going to fall apart. And so if they're working in this manner where she's working harder, she's making the money, and he's either saying, no, we're not going to do that, or he's saying, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do, she's not going to respect him long term, and it's not going to work.
Um, hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with you about it being authentic. I think that's a really big issue that a lot of men, a lot of them, but I feel like a lot of men don't seem to understand that. Like, even in this issue of a woman being taken care of financially, and a lot of men will say, well, it's 2019 and it's so hard for a man to solely take care of a household, etc. But men still want the same level of respect that a typical housewife would have for her husband who's doing everything for her. And it's just not going to happen. Like a woman can try and force that if she just thinks it's good to do. But it, as you said, it's not going to be authentic. And he may end up feeling that it's not authentic. So that alone can cause a lot of tension. Um,
Agreed.
yeah. So,
And that's really where I see, that's where I really see the big failure. For long-term relationships, you obviously it has to be authentic, and it's where I see, uh, you know, men, particular. So right in this world we live in, where the society where we live in, this culture we live in, where we're taught men and women are the same in terms of being socially just, right? That what happens is we don't understand the differences between men and women, and since we don't understand, we don't have the knowledge, and we don't have the skills, and it's just very difficult to have long-term healthy relationships without having those knowledge and skills, if not impossible.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so,
Hmm.
I just see, one of the failings of men today, or I should, a better way is that we have a lot of mediocre men. They're not failing, let's say, but they're at least mediocre, and it's getting worse. You know, like at the mosque, we talk about men need to treat their women well,
Hmm.
and that's true, but what is the definition of treating well? Just being nice and accommodating isn't enough, and
Yeah.
that's where we need, men to be truly people that are more than mediocre, that are great men, that do great things and take risks, that are strong and confident, and then that respect will come naturally from the wife.
If the man is a leader. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and you know what the funny thing is eh, I don't know, it's strange because I guess that some men need that emphasis of be nice to your wife, be kind. If you're a very aggressive man, then maybe you need to calm down, so you need that side of it. But I do notice there's like this, for in a small example, this hyper focus on, for example, the Prophet said it was helping his wives in the house. And there's such an emphasis on this, and men should help in the house. And for me, yeah, alhamdulillah, that's valuable. But I think it's still important that we say he helped. It was not his primary responsibility. He wasn't doing half of the work in the household. And that we really, what would make men better, so to speak, is to focus more on being men, to focus more on fulfilling their roles, not to be hyper focused on, like you said, be nice, be kind, help with chores, but that the masculine role needs to be fulfilled first and foremost. And yeah, if you have extra energy, then help as well. But that, I don't think that should be the focus.
I agree. I agree that like sewing and doing the dishes and helping around the house is secondary versus the primary role of providing and protecting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like one of the things that, and this is just my personal reflection, is that in the Quran on 434 about how men are maintainers of women. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like what I got out of that is men are supposed to be the providers and protectors for women. But what's implied in that, and this is just my opinion, is that men and women, or men are the providers and protectors of women, and that what's implied is that women want or should be provided and protected for.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, women have to, so a man has to play the role of provider and protector, and a woman has to play the role of being provided and protected for.
Interesting. What does that what does that mean to you, to play the role of being provided and protected for?
Well, just like we're talking about modern marriages and traditional marriages, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when the woman is, I'll use your words, right, working harder and making more money, and I mean, honestly, in this modern, I've seen situations like that, and it's almost inevitable that the woman is going to say, "Why do I need him?"
Exactly.
And
Yes.
and if the roles were reversed, then that wouldn't be the case. It would be fine, right?
Right. Right.
And so, you know, men and women, there's a lot of this, they're the same in a lot of ways, but they have different emotional needs,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to understand what those needs are, and and I'm talking about right in the context of marriages right now and relationships is that we have to understand those and build those skills towards that. You know, like yeah. I mean I mean even in just in terms of like sexual polarity, for example. Like I mean I could go through a whole list, but at the end of the day, like when a guy acts like his wife's best friend,
Mm-hmm.
best girlfriend, you know, like yoga partner and TV movie watcher partner and flower gardening partner, and like she's gonna
Yeah.
treat him like the same, right? Treat him
Yeah.
as
Mm-hmm.
a great girlfriend. And there's gonna be, you know, I just was reading a statistic that 20% of marriages are sexless marriages now.
Hmm.
And, you know, that's a lot. And that's sexless. Like there's still a lot of marriages that uh, the frequency is still very low. And you know, I think in this society where we just focus on same,
Right.
and I think most men and women, they're trying their best to be what they think the best is, and I just don't think there's a good model for what good husband, good wives are in our society today. It's much different than obviously 1,000 years ago.
Right. Right. And it's very difficult, and maybe I don't know, but Allahu Alam, I feel like that is a part of the difficulty of modern marriage is the fact that people know they don't need each other. And I think that alone
Mm-hmm.
makes marriage more difficult because, I mean, alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we don't have this problem as much. But just to touch on the non Muslim society for a moment, that they don't need marriage to commit and to have intercourse. They don't need marriage for that. They don't need a woman doesn't need marriage to be taken care of. You don't need marriage to have good food. You don't need marriage to have someone to take care of your kids. You can take them to the daycare. So like of course none of these things are equal to what a marriage should bring, but I think there's so much less of a need that almost like marriage has to rely on the two people themselves wanting to be together, and that makes it a lot more difficult, I think, for it to last and for people to stick it in.
You're saying that they're just living kind of different lives side by side.
Often, I mean, when you hear some like very ultra modern marriages that women are supposedly supposed to look up to, where the women are able to pursue their careers, there's some of these marriages where they'll have a career in another city and they're traveling
Mm.
to and fro their city, and their husband is sometimes is not pursuing his career to the same level, sometimes he is, but they are pretty much living separate lives, and I don't know, coming together when they want to or for the kids' sake or whatever. But that is almost treated like the ideal of modern marriage, to be able to fully pursue your career and still
Mm.
have the marriage and the kids.
It was interesting when you talking about that. Like when we were coming up with this definition of good husband and good wife, there was is essentially what I got out of it was, or reflection I had on it was like he's kind of the head of the spear, if you will, trying to provide, and she is trying to he is trying to help her help him, and vice versa, right? Like there's this they have their own swim lanes and they're helping each other, right? There's synergy there. Historically speaking, it's really interesting. Historically speaking, men in the general, right? And I'm talking for like thousands of years, the relationships that have flourished, and where the wives have flourished and the children have flourished, is where the man puts a lot, the husband puts a lot of investment, time, money, etc., into the wife and into the children.
Mm.
This the idea of we'll just be, and that's really the sunnah, right? That's the sunnah, and this idea of in this modern marriage context, well, I think what you said is very articulate. I'll be somewhat independent, you be somewhat independent, and we'll come together and we'll hope for the best. We live in times of social experimentation in terms
Right.
of relationships, in terms of gender roles, in terms of gender definitions. And right, this whole concept is very new. Like quite frankly, even the concept of women in the workplace, and I'm not saying that women should not be in the workplace. Don't anyone say that. But what I am saying is that it's new, right? So,
Right.
right, really, since about 1970, the 1970s, has it been becoming more mainstream that women are in the workplace, and so this is really in uncharted territory,
Hmm.
even in the West.
Yeah, yeah, and to specify, I know this is what you mean, but just to specify women being in the workplace side by side with men. Yeah, and I was just reading an article this morning that stay marriages with stay-at-home dads are like 35% more likely to end in divorce. And
Mm.
to me, it's not surprising because I generally think that traditional gender roles are better. I think they're tradition for a reason. But people have this sort of thing where they feel like, well, if I'm making more money as the woman, it's just more logical for him to stay home with the kids. Like, yeah, we get it. There should be a primary caregiver. So if I'm making more money, then he should stay home with the kids and I can pursue my career. And because we're so out of touch with gender role, even just what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and what those differences are, then that just sounds like a logical, sound idea. But the numbers show otherwise, and of course some people will say, oh,
And it's very socially acceptable to do that. Yeah.
mm, to
Sorry, I was saying, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say that some people will say that um that's just because we still have these, what do you call it, sort of like we've been brainwashed into these gender roles, and if we just we just work hard
Mm.
enough, we'll be brainwashed out of it. And Allahu alam, I'm sure that some of it is socialization, but I think some of it is definitely natural, and that it just doesn't sit well with a woman for very long to see her husband at home with the kids while she's out at work.
Right. I agree with that. I very much agree with that. In your last video about modern marriage, you had talked about, it's like 2/3, 70%, something like that, of women leave men,
Yeah.
or they're the ones that initiate divorce. And, it's obvious you're going to have a bad relationship when there is like domestic violence or abuse by the man, right? That's obvious.
Hmm.
But, right, and we talked about this, Nora Dean, about how what's the common theme about how men who are financially responsible and are, call it nice, right, to their wives, and they end up leaving. And I've seen that play out in the real world many times where
Hmm.
the man is like just accommodating and nice and giving and writing poems and giving flowers and doing all this. And and she becomes she just naturally starts being disrespectful to the guy, and
Mm.
it's his feedback loop. So he then tries being more nice, more accommodating, write more poems, get more flowers,
Hmm.
and she's the one that ends up leaving.
Right. Yes, and it's a fascinating thing because I don't think that women can fully articulate what's going on because they've been right because they've been taught that this is what husbands should be today. They should be like your best friend. They should be nice. They should be accommodating. All the things that you mentioned. So I don't think women even fully understand why they're
Mm,
unhappy in those kinds of marriages. For him, Lee
yeah,
said it's never.
I agree with you, and it's I agree with you, and to underscore that, like, yeah, how many times have I heard a woman say, "I want a man to be loving and treat me well," like thousands of times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the reality is that if that were, if that, if so, that is true. But if that was all that there was, then you wouldn't have this dynamic where women are attracted to the quote unquote bad boys, right? Like women,
Exactly.
and so like, men, I really believe this, like men, like at a primordial level, like hardwired in our DNA, men are attracted to physical beauty. And I really believe that women are attracted to men who are strong, confident, fearless, etc. And so
Right.
that's where the dynamic is. But we,
Mm-hmm.
as a society, as we're talking more about men and women are the same and there's not any differences, which is obviously not true, that gets lost on what does it mean for me to play my role as a woman or as a man, and
Mm-hmm.
what is it that I want, and what do I want the other person to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a fan of this social experimentation in terms of
Mm-hmm.
relationships. Like just for myself, being through the war wounds of it, I don't believe that. I just don't believe it's a working model. And honestly, especially as Muslims, there's something very sacred about men being men, and men being masculine, women being feminine. In order, you and I, we talked about this briefly, that, I said, well, masculinity is under attack right now. And you were like, well, femininity has been under attack for a lot longer. And,
Right.
and I really, and I believe that's accurate. ASA, American Sociology Association.
Oh, APA.
I No, ASA.
ASA? Okay.
I Yeah, it's ASA. Maybe I have the word wrong for S, but ASA, American something Association. They just came out and saying that it was so interesting. They just came out with this report, I think it was last week, that said that traditional masculinity, so it's interesting, it's no longer toxic masculinity, it's traditional masculinity.
Yeah.
They came out with things that were saying like if someone plays, they didn't even call it a man, but it's someone who plays the traditional masculine role, that will, like risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love like risk taking. I love risk taking. Like I think it's great. Like I've started businesses. I've done. I mean, just becoming Muslim, right? Converting stuff. That's a big risk, right? Like risk taking. They said risk taking will lead to homophobia. Like like
Mm-hmm.
that is the stuff that's being pushed on us. Like, and that stuff's being taught in the mental health industry. That's being taught
Yeah.
in schools. I just find it. I find it. You use the term brainwashing. Whether you call it brainwashing, whether you call it social conditioning, what have you. Times have obviously changed over the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and yeah, like men, we talked about this, how men or women, they marry across and up in social status, right? And we just have men who are just no longer worthy of being married to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have, I just saw this one study that showed like over just the last 5 years. So it used to be, let's go back to the 70s again, like 70s, 80s, 90s, men on standardized testing would score above women in all categories, and sometimes women would score incrementally better than men in verbal.
Okay.
Over the last, and then in science and math, men did uh, much had much higher scores, significantly higher scores than women.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 5 years, women outscore men in every category, including math and science. And
Interesting.
in universities, women now make up 56%. It used to be back in the 70s, I believe it used to be, and I'm not trying to say the 70s was like the golden era or anything like that, but
Yeah.
just to show how much we've changed.
Yeah.
That it used to be that men made up 58% of the population in universities. Now it's 44%. Women are 56%.
Hmm.
In graduate work, women are it's about 58% more women. So as you go up, there's more of a there's less men. And so there was a study that was done recently, right? It's so interesting. Like there was a study that was done. A great indicator of a successful marriage is the height difference between a male and female. Okay, so the greater the height
Huh.
difference, the taller the man is, the greater probability that they'll have a successful marriage.
Uh-huh.
And so what's interesting is that so if you have a woman that's like 6'2", for example,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of men she is willing to marry is significantly less than the amount of men, the supply of men if she's 5'2".
Mm-hmm.
You follow me?
Yeah.
So, so, so and the same thing is true with education. So if you have a woman who has, let's say, a graduate degree, it's very, very, very rare she'll agree to marry a man with a high school education.
Right.
And so, and so what's happening is just women are becoming increasingly better educated, men are increasingly becoming less educated, and there's just less men that are willing or are able husbands
Yeah.
that are attractive husbands for women. And I just see,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not optimistic about where marriage is going. I just don't see men have in the aggregate, that men are having the skills, that there will be supply of good men, that women, like what you're even talking about, a lot of women don't even know why they don't know they're attracted to strong, confident men. They're just told
Right.
men are kind of these like neat tamed animals or animals that need to be tamed. If they can just find someone nice, they'll just do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one, it's not true that that's how men really are. Like, and we talked about this, like men, if they knew that the ingredient to have a successful marriage, if it was just so simple just to be nice to their wife, like every guy or most guys would do that, right? There's some bad apples, obviously, but um, I just, right, the lack of supply of good men not having the skills, I just see that marriage as an institution, and then also when you add the legal aspects of marriage, and we talked about this, like, that downsides, or in your last video, you talked about the downsides of traditional marriage for men, or just marriage for men.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the laws are very, are very anti-male, and especially like where I had my two divorces was in Virginia, and I had a son from my first marriage. This was a very anti-father
Mm.
state, and so I just see the institution of marriage falling apart,
Right.
and also just in terms of Muslims, like we're taught that Islam is this religion of peace, and we just don't have a lot of peace at home, right? Like we
Yeah.
can't even like, and our kids, like I've heard stats like kids leaving Islam at like 50, 60, 70%. And and now it's true that kids are leaving other religions too,
Mhm.
but like, what are we doing to providing a good environment for our children? Like, what examples are we doing? And I don't believe it's because we're bad. We just don't have the relationship skills. Like, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be CEO of $100 million company, and you can be still a bad husband because you just don't have the skills and know how to treat a woman. And obviously, vice versa is true. A woman cannot have the skills how to be a good wife and how to.
Yeah.
Um, so, I really feel like this is really a crisis of our time.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot that has changed, and we're not really sure what the outcome of that will be. And obviously, so far, there has not been a good outcome. And I did just want to second you on on this idea of why do women go after the quote unquote bad boy or bad guy or whatever. And it is, I think it is not because he's bad. It's because he's manly. It's because even though he may be doing the wrong thing, he looks like a leader. He has this I don't know, aura of masculinity, or I don't know. It's masculinity, but then in a sense it's not real because he's not going after positive things. But I think that is really what women are attracted to, and it's like men don't really get that it's not, which is partly women's fault, but men don't really get that it's not that the guy is bad, it's that he's a leader, it's that he's strong. So if you're nice and strong and a leader, then women would also be attracted to that. I did want to read some people's comments. Okay, so Jermaine said from earlier, modern marriages sound whack, modern men sound weak. Fahim said, when the man is the breadwinner, he is the captain. If she is the primary breadwinner, she becomes the coach. Let's see. Jermaine also said, in our communities, most women are the primary breadwinners in many cases.
When you say our community, what specifically, which community is
Yeah,
that?
Jermaine, I think you must be talking about the Black Muslim community. I don't think the Muslim community in general. Maybe the Black Muslim community in America. I'm not sure. Or maybe he's talking about his state of Michigan. Let us know, Jermaine,
Yeah.
which community you're talking about.
But I mean, there's no question, all the trends are going, and all the experts are saying, just in America and in the West in general, but in America, it's only a matter of time before, as an aggregate, women are the breadwinners in most marriages. And
Yeah, it's about
yeah,
25%
and
now. I forget what it was in the 80s. I think 13% or something like that. But I don't know, I read 25% today, but even that sounds pretty high. But I don't know. That's what the stat
mm,
said.
mm,
It's definitely rising. Yeah.
yeah, and we talked about like education. It's only a matter of time. Again, what a lot of the experts are saying, it's just only a matter of time before women hold most leadership positions. Whether it's
Hmm.
in government or in and not that that's a bad thing, but what I do view as bad is that in terms of relationships, well, one, we just are having mediocre men. Like, we need men to know what it is to be a man and like stand up and be not mediocre, but to be great. Like, we were talking about just briefly on like to define what that means. Like, we were talking about how women like, there was a school shooting. I don't know. It was like maybe 2 years ago or so, a year and a half ago. I forgot which one it was. It was in Florida, and this high school kid went in there and shot people. He got like droves of letters and emails from women that were just like throwing themselves at him, right? Because yeah, exactly, and it was because this kind of bad boy dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Wow.
not to say that,
That's to the
like,
extreme.
yeah, that's the extreme, right? So like, when a man demonstrates fearlessness, dominance, like,
Yeah.
uh, that women find that attractive. Like, even if, I've even read that if there's two guys or multiple guys, they're talking and there's some women on the side, watching them. A guy who will, let's say, like hit another guy, or just kind of slap him on the back or whatever it is, and the other man doesn't respond, that guy is considered more dominant and he's more attractive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
um, so really,
Exactly.
women just are hardwired are attracted to strength and confidence, skills, risk taking.
Right.
And what you want is a man that can do that, that is also righteous.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's the goal, and that's really the Sirah and the Sunnah, is to be, I mean, righteous as you can be, and we're going to make things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't care who's in my way. That's what we want. Right? Men that can stand, the right stand in like enjoining good and what's forbidden evil. And it's really interesting, like in the Quran, just the word rajul, right? Which can mean like foot or like lower leg. And I heard Sheikh Hamza one time say it's really, it can be can be meant as one who can stand on their own 2 feet. And we really need
Interesting.
men. What's that?
No, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So we really need men that know how to stand on their own 2 feet, like
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, physically, financially, intellectually, emotionally. Yeah, I really believe that is the answer, that the main ingredient is missing today in men to have good relationships.
Is this combination of strength and kindness, you're saying, or strength and righteousness? Right?
Yeah, righteousness,
Okay.
righteousness. Like there's times where, yeah, I mean, there's times to be kind and there's times not to be kind.
Hmm.
I mean, and honestly, think about that, right? So, as a female, like, what do you want? Do you want a guy? You want a guy that will be able to stand up for himself, so that you feel secure that he can stand up for you and stand up for your family,
Right.
like,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, right. You don't want some guy just writing flowers and writing poems all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's
Right.
as men. That's what we're taught. We're taught that that's what you should do because men are just like domestic violent waiting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not true, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the circle of guys that I know, like I don't know what the statistics are on like how you define domestic violence, right? That's a whole thing. And I've heard stats
Right.
from something very low to very high for men and for women.
I think
And
I read it was 1 out of 10, 1 out of 4 for women, and 1 out of 10 for men, something like that.
yeah. Anyway, not to get a whole distracted on that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
tangent, but uh, right, but it's in men's best interests, like selfishly, to have a good relationship with their wife.
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah. Of course. That's absolutely right. And, I feel like one of the mistakes of feminism and a lot of these other revolutions was to think that, which I recently learned, I still haven't read much about it, but queer theory, which their whole thing was, it's gender in and of itself that is the problem. And if we get rid of gender, then things will be better. And that's kind of the mistake that I think we've made, is in thinking, okay, how do we get rid of these issues of men being dominant in abusive ways? Well, let's just make men not dominant. Let's teach men to not be dominant. And that was the
Yeah, I,
mistake.
I would say like let's get rid of the abuse. Like there's no reason
Yeah.
to neuter men. Like women are not attracted to neuter men. And honestly, a society of neutered men is a dangerous society.
Yeah.
It's a weak society. You know, who's no one's going to stand up and provide and protect when you have a guy who can't even do that for himself. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
yeah.
And that's sort of the, again, it goes back to not really understanding our differences, or almost feeling like we're above those differences, like, hey, this is modernity, we don't need men to protect us, we have guns and the army and whatever else. But there's still something inside of us as women that still wants to be protected, even if we have the gun and the alarm system and the dog. You still want that from a man. You don't want him, hiding out too if someone breaks into the house. You want to
Yeah.
believe that he could protect you, even if it's not as necessary as it was in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And frankly, like this is not new. Like in terms of, I mean, it's new in terms of the West about trying to redefine genders and redefining gender roles. And now we have technology now that can do irreversible, um, how do I want to say that? I don't want to use necessarily the word harm, but can do irreversible results.
Hmm.
And, I was listening to this one lecture about how, in Greece, if you look at the statues in Greece, for example, they used to be of these men that were very robust and strong. And then later in civilization, as they got into transgender and lack of gender roles or a blur of gender roles, you see these statues that are of these like very, I think the term was used, wet noodle boys, right? And 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 it was really the end of their civilization.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think,
You know,
and I
there's
think
a
that
yeah. No, there's a feminist, Camille Paglia. I haven't read her whole argument, but she said a very similar thing.
I think that's who it was actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. That
yeah.
transgenderism is signaling the end of society. I haven't read
And
her
she's
writing.
transgender too.
She's transgender?
She considers herself transgender. So she's never done like an operation or anything, but
Interesting.
she considers herself. She is a big advocate of traditional gender roles, like
She
huge.
is,
Like I've heard her.
interestingly enough, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard her say like masculinity is under assault in our days, and she's considered herself transgender.
Wow, I did not know that. I know she did say something about feeling masculine or being more masculine. I didn't know she said she was transgender. Okay. That's kind of a side
She
note, but
identifies that way.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's read some more comments. Actually, so we defined modern marriage and then we kind of went into that. So I think we want to define traditional marriage, but let me try and look at some of these comments. Okay. Talia said that's because natural femininity has respect for roles of true men and they hate that. Feminism might not like that, but being a true Muslima naturally falls under it. She respects the role and honor of manhood. Okay, mashallah. Um, yeah. Zainab said it's the same here in the UK. We see a rise in girls outdoing the boys academically. Yeah, and I did actually want to just say one thing about that, which is it's partly why I feel very cautious about these movements to go into anywhere, Africa, India, wherever they're going, to empower girls. Because I always think, okay, you empower them, you give them an education, who are they going to marry? If the boys remain in the same circumstance, this is going to be a this is going to be a very very difficult for him either to find husbands or to get into marriages where the husband is not really making money and she's the breadwinner, so it's not a great dynamic. Like that isn't really setting them up for a great future if we don't tackle both the girls and the boys.
I 100% agree. Like, I have a teenage son, and what I've had conversations about exactly this, about relationships and gender roles, and I told him I remember the first time I told him we need strong, confident men, and he said, "Dad, if you said that in school, that would be considered misogynist."
Wow.
and and when I told him about what I just articulated earlier about how men, like over the last 5 years, it's changed that where men just score much lower or score lower on all categories than women do now on standardized tests in the United States. And he said, I didn't know that. He's like, I just assumed women always did better than men.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's
And so just the idea of what normal
right. It's
is
changing for
changing.
them. Absolutely. So let's just look at a couple more comments before we get to traditional marriage. Um, oh, I just wanted to clarify. I think you said that still in graduate school and doctor programs, there are still more men, or has that changed also?
No, 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 no. For every in graduate, right, master's and doctorate,
Yeah.
for every 100 men, there's 135 women.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that one. I thought that men still outnumbered as you got higher, but okay, interesting.
No, no.
Wow. So Fahim said men need to get their finesse game together. Jermaine said a lot of
What,
bad apples.
what I was be interested what you mean by finesse game. What is that?
In this context, what is finesse? I guess just getting themselves together. I think that
Getting game, getting game. Yeah.
hopefully not game. I don't think men just need game.
Well, I mean game in terms of not knowing how to. I don't right. I don't mean like in terms of pickup, but I mean game
Okay.
in terms of knowing to how to increase like sexual attraction, polarity, in a, let's say in a
Okay.
marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
All hello. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I'll just read a couple more. Um, he gives off he gives off a sense of security. I guess he means that the man gives off a sense of security. Okay. And let's see, this is a perfect time for our elders to step up and apply their wisdom, especially the ones who have a stable,
Mm.
loving household. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, so sure, but I don't see it happening. And the reason I don't see it happening is because just real talk here, right? So, if I look at mosques today, usually like it's a struggle, right? So usually like the imams or the people that run the mosque are have come over from a Muslim country, and
Okay.
they're still right. It takes an immense amount of work to adjust to a whole new culture, right? And like for like when you think about it, like Muslims represent about 1% of the United States. If I is so I'm a Muslim convert, but if I look at Muslims as an observer
Yeah.
over the last 20 years, it's essentially like if I could sum up like the conversation in terms of PR, right, public relations, I would say Muslims are essentially saying, "Won't you like me now? Like, can't we fit
Yeah.
in now?"
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and
Especially immigrant Muslims and children.
especially agreed, right? And so to have someone who has a mentality of like, I want to fit in, to say, well, we're going to do something that completely doesn't fit in. We're going to say that we don't think that we're going to go against this grain of sameness between men and women. And we're going to say that we think that men should be men and women should be women. And that goes completely contradictory to we want to fit in.
Yeah. No, I
And so I think it's great that people would stand up and say it, which is like I think having these kind of conversations and other people having this is great. And it's hard for me to see elders doing that. And that's not a criticism on elders. They have had to go through craziness just to get where they are and supply for families and provide a better opportunity for their children.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And Jermaine, I would want to ask you, do you feel like in the Black Muslim community that the elders had better marriages and that they would be people to turn to, that they had more traditional marriages that we could look to? So I'd want to know that from you, because definitely there would be a difference between the Black Muslim community and the immigrant Muslim community and other, like there would be I think sort of racial cultural differences there. But I definitely agree with you that if there are people who want to fit in, they wouldn't really be people to turn to. So one more comment, and then we should try to get to traditional marriage. So Zainab said, traditionally in my culture, youth would have gone training in preparation to marriage. But we have abandoned that tradition to the detriment of our community, high divorce rates. Perhaps we need to get back to traditions. I'm from the Somali community. Okay, thank you,
Mm.
Nina. Yeah, so that's definitely valuable because I know some of us are from like, well, we're all from different communities. So yeah, the Somali community, they may have something distinctly valuable that if the elders stepped up, it would be valuable to hear from them. So let's get into traditional marriage. So we define traditional marriage as having a power dynamic where the man is the leader, that they know the differences between men and women, that there are gender differences, and that they both have primary roles. The most obvious being that the wife is the primary caretaker and the husband is the primary breadwinner. So you said that you were first an advocate of modern marriage and then you shifted towards traditional marriage. So what do you think were some key aspects that you found faulty in modern marriage that you felt like traditional marriage does this better or has better ideas about those aspects? Or whatever
I'm
else you
trying
want
to,
to say. You don't have
yeah.
to.
So I'm trying to think what I could say where I'm not repeating myself. So,
Yeah.
right. So the context is right. I was raised right in the 70s, 80s, and my mom worked pretty much from the time I was very young, and I was always taught that, just like a lot of us are taught, that we should, she works, my father works, she does the dishes, father should do the dishes, she does housework, he should do housework, et cetera, et cetera. So I just bought into it. I just thought, yeah, what could be wrong with that? That makes sense. Like fair, whatever. Um, and then when I got into um, marriages, so I'll say this. So in my first marriage, my wife, she stayed home and I worked.
Okay.
Okay. And in my second marriage, we both worked. And she had kids, I had my son. And but what was interesting in the first marriage was, even though it was a quote unquote traditional marriage, it was not traditional in so much as I really wasn't playing that leader role. I was really
Mm,
being that I wasn't being a leader emotionally. I wasn't playing provider and protector emotionally. Right. I didn't lead spiritually. I didn't like, I mean, we both were practicing, alhamdulillah, but I wasn't leading and setting a direction for us. And it was very accommodating and nice because that's just what I taught. Like, that's just what I just assumed. I just thought that's what everyone is supposed to do. And so no one ever told me otherwise. And so, right, that ended in divorce. And like a lot of guys, or a lot of people just thought it was the other person's fault. Then when I got married the second time, completely different women, like completely different. And, but a lot of the same dynamics happened. And it wasn't because of what they were doing, it was because of what I was doing. And it was because I really wasn't taking a leadership role. So when we talk about traditional, I think it's not just financial, but it's also about men leading. And when men, like we were talking about, when men lead and show, demonstrate skill and leadership at home and outside of the home, that they'll have respect. Like women want to be
mm,
loved, men want to be respected,
mhm,
and you can't like a guy like a guy can't fake love, and a
mhm.
woman can't fake respect. You might be able to do it
Yeah.
for a little bit,
Yeah.
and so that's where I feel like getting back to the basics. You, like men and women, there's synergy. Let's see, how do I say it? They complement each other, in my opinion. So what I've learned is men and women complement each other physically. Men and women complement each other in the same way emotionally. And when you take that away, you're
Mm,
taking away what makes them happy. Like you're taking away getting their emotional needs met.
mhm. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I don't think I ever really thought about traditional marriage in that way, in terms of the man being a leader in other ways, or being, I guess, an emotional leader. Um, and it is an interesting thing, because I think even on the opposite side of that, for women who, like, you can choose to outwardly have a traditional marriage. The man works and the woman stays at home. But if you don't really have a deep sense of what that is, you can still end up with problems. Like, you can say as a woman, okay, I want to be a housewife, but if you don't really have a deep sense of what that means, you can end up bored, or you don't feel productive, or you took on this role not really knowing how much of a role it was. And I think that what you're saying is similar. Like, you took on the breadwinner role, but not really the sort of bigger role of being a leader in other ways, it seems.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Yes. You know, there's an analogy, like in the Quran, in Surah Neba. I believe it's 6 and 7 or 7 and 8. Can't remember how, like, Allah talks about, and I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember the exact translation, but about how Allah makes the earth like spread out and makes the mountains as stakes or tent pegs, right? And this is just a reflection I have about masculine and femininity. So, like, earth is in Arabic is feminine, mountain is masculine, right? So when you look at earth, it's right there's that's where life happens, right? That's where there's lots of various expression, right? Like, there's feminine qualities behind that. When you look at mountains, it's so interesting, right? Like, I've heard so many times, like, women say, "Where are the real men?
Yeah.
Where are the real men?" And when you look at, like, a tent stake or a mountain, like, you just see like the top of it. You don't see the foundation under the ground.
Hmm.
And really, men being fearless, men taking risks and failing, building skills, like, that's the foundation that you don't see, those experiences. And as a society, as we're taught, for men, we're taking away that foundation, right? Like, and a lot talks about, right, like, um, I mean, even geologically, like, there's a reason for mountains. Like, they're not there just for because they're cool or they're pretty. Like, they actually provide stability.
Hmm.
And I feel like masculine energy, right? Masculine and energy feed off each other. Like, the more masculine a man acts, generally that will translate the more feminine a female acts, and vice versa. Like, I mean, it's really interesting. Like, if you look at
Right.
men who don't provide that leadership role, where she feels and she'll, like, physically take on masculine traits. Like, she'll cut her hair short, she'll gain weight,
Hmm.
she'll,
Interesting.
like, yeah, it is very interesting. Yeah, like, when women are stressed out,
Yeah.
they eat carbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure all the women can relate to that. Very true. Yeah. Okay, let me get to some of these. Yeah, because I guess when we were talking about modern marriage, then we ended up talking about traditional marriage a bit anyway, so we don't
Right.
have to go into as much detail. But I just think what you said is really valuable, and it's really something to reflect on, that even those of us who want to be in traditional marriage, we should really think about what that is beyond the surface of the breadwinner and the homemaker. Or probably, or
Yeah.
more than likely, we just won't be fulfilled in those roles, or we won't be fulfilling it for the other person, or something's going to be missing, if we don't really understand it. So, let me see. Um, okay. Maruf says she considers. Oh, okay. He was just talking about from our Camille Paglia sidetrack. Okay. Fahim, a man is one who is always ready to go all the way, and the one meeting him halfway is just a bonus. Okay. Bilal said,
Wait. The one going halfway is just what?
is a bonus.
I don't know what that. Well, I
I
don't. I'm not
think I
following
think
that.
what he's saying is that the man is ready to be the leader completely, and that if she helps, then that's great in
Oh,
itself.
she goes half. I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bilal said, let's see, the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, you can judge the success or failure of a society by the education and standard of its women. Okay, interesting. I'm not sure how to put that in context, but hmm.
I mean, the fact is, and I think you brought this up, like no matter how you cut it, like results matter, and women are less happy than they've ever been in the West
Yeah,
or in the United States. The study, right? Women are less happy now, and they have more leadership, more education, all that, and it's not working.
and
And
yet
I
they seem
attribute it
very
to,
confused as to why that is. Yeah.
I, I mean, when I hear women talk at rallies or protests or what have you,
Mm-hmm.
they seem pretty confident. They don't look confused at all.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I mean, just collectively, women are less happy now, and I really attribute that because there's just not men who are great men to protect and provide and meet their needs, and so they're looking for other ways to do that. It's interesting, like so in our definition of good husband, I specifically put in there. Um, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I put in there specifically about, yeah, here it is. Providing interesting and exciting experiences for her, like what she wants.
Yeah, I
Like
thought that was
if he's not doing that, it's in her nature. She will go out and do something else um, to get that emotional fulfillment.
hmm. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I've definitely
Yeah.
never thought of that. Sounds like a good idea, but I
Yeah.
never thought of it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
And and just to say, I'll put this in context too. Like just to say, like traditional versus modern. Like I don't know if we have some listeners who are thinking about married or who are married, but just brass tacks. Like like being a masculine man. Like you need to lead, right? Like that's my take. Like embrace your masculinity, don't shun it. And like there is a lot of skills that can take a long time to learn those things in terms of right on a spiritual front on a like how many guys that are just plain fat, like how hard is it, like eat right and get on a treadmill, done, like not that hard. And like so like building up skills on right emotional front, all that, like that, I'm not saying it's easy, it takes a lot of work, but getting into a marriage, like I see this happens all the time where a guy's like, hey, I graduated school and like got a job and like, I want to do things in the hallway and so like I want to get married and so like, okay, cool. And like they don't I can't even like lead their family to a trip downtown. Like they just don't have the skills like to and I see that all the place. Like we don't even talk about, like I'm talking about collectively within the Muslim community right now. Like we don't collectively talk about like what what are the skills to make a great man, to make a great husband, to make a great father, and being nice and loving and kind is a part of it, and there is a lot more to do that.
to be, yeah, to be a good
Yeah,
man. Yeah, and we,
yeah.
I don't
So
know.
I'm not saying it's not as easy as like traditional versus modern. Okay, I'll go traditional, then it'll all work out. Like
Yeah.
there's still a lot. Like I'm talking about for men, there's still a lot that needs to happen, right? To and I really believe that for a successful relationship, and again, I'm talking from a man's perspective, for 90% of it is that you're just rocking and rolling. You're like a great man yourself, and then you'll get the fruits of that labor will be in your relationship.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I think we spent more time on talking about men than on women, not purposefully, but mashallah. I would say that the same would go for women again, as we kind of mentioned, that if you do want to be in that role, then something that I realize is that because we've internalized this devaluing of traditional women's role, even for women who get into, okay, I want to be a housewife, don't completely know what that means, what that takes, what that's like on a day to day, how that
Mm.
even looks, if it's successful or if it's a failure, like not really sure what that is. So even for women, there's a lot to learn there for people entering into that kind of
Mm.
marriage. And I agree with what you said before, that modern marriage, I think in general, um, is just really not working out. And probably partly because in modern marriage it's so much harder to be successful, because you really don't know what success looks like. Like what is a good
Mm.
modern marriage? I think people aren't really sure because it's new and we're trying to figure out what that even is.
That makes sense. You know, in my opinion, just through my experiences and study and learning, that the quote unquote modern marriage, however you define that, non-traditional, it, it's, in my opinion, it's natural for men to be masculine. It's natural for women to be feminine. And when you erode that, you're getting out of meeting your natural emotional needs for both men and women.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. So I think there was one, so it's 11:15 now. I think we have about half hour left, inshallah, if it goes that. Um, so we wanted to talk about, let's see. Well, I feel like we kind of touched on this, sort of what we think is better. I think we're both in agreement that traditional marriage is better for the most part, but then I would want to touch on, okay, if it is better, then what is it that people see within modern marriage that makes them choose that more often in our time? What are people seeing as better about a more modern setup?
I mean, I would love to hear the people that are listening to comment on what their opinion is.
Yeah.
You know, in my opinion, so I'm in the tech industry, okay, and so there's this unsaid thought, for example, in the tech industry, newer is better. And
Yeah.
I think there is the same dynamic. Well, like it's new, like modern marriages, it's newer. Like we've evolved. Like that was then. We've learned so much more, and we're just better now than we were in yesteryear.
Mm-hmm.
And so, where I don't necessarily agree that just because it's newer, it is better in all situations. We've seen things go through cycles and ebbs and flows,
Mm-hmm.
and I think just the social conditioning through through culture, through society, through
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
media, through whatever, it's just assumed that is more, if like brass tacks, like if you say you believe in traditional marriages, you believe that men should lead, should provide and protect. Like there's a strong narrative out there. Well, then you're a misogynist. Well, if you're a misogynist, you're probably a racist. And so it's so it's not, you have to go against the grain. Like I mean, even as Muslims, like it goes against the grain of our society to even, I mean, forget even Muslims, just to believe in God and practice faith. And
Yeah.
then especially in our society, about you have to go against the grain about practicing Islam. And so I just think there's just a lot of societal tendencies, and we don't talk about, like, especially at the mosque, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We're kind of in, like we were talking about earlier, we're just in this mode of like, we just want to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like there's all these there's other people that are terrorists that aren't Muslims, so, right? So we should fit in now, right? And so um, I think that there's a pushback to talk about these issues there. And so since it's not talked about and people just kind of follow the herd, if you will, that's what happens. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would just say, and we do want to hear from you all, if you think that modern marriage is better, or if you think there are some things about modern marriage that's better, then that's fine. We'd like to hear. I think that a lot of people look at modern marriage, especially for women, and feel like, well, a woman can be more successful in her career if she has a husband who's helping her. And one of the really good points in this book, Unfinished Business, by the woman who wrote the really big article about why women still can't have it all, then one of the things she touched on is that the reality is women do want to have successful careers, but they don't want their husband to be less successful than them. So they want the husband to help out in the house, but they don't want it to hurt his career, which is almost an impossible thing to do. You can't spend a lot of time at home and a lot of time with your career. You have to choose one as your primary focus, or you're juggling and still you're not going to get as far as if you could really go full speed. But I do think that that is the allure of modern marriage, is that a woman will feel like she can get further in her career. She may also feel like, well, leader may have a bad connotation, that, well, I don't want any man telling me what to do, especially if you're coming into marriage after being single for a period of time and used to certain kinds of freedom. You may feel like, well, I don't want to be led by anyone. I want to make mutual decisions. I would think that's another reason that people would find modern marriage more appealing. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of it to me. I don't know if you have anything else. Well, what did you find before that you thought was more appealing about modern marriage when you were more of a modern?
I mean, the truth is, I mean, that'd be asking me like before I was Muslim, like I was raised Christian, like what do you find appealing about Christianity or more appealing about Christianity? Like, well, I did it. I just
Okay.
kind of followed the herd. I
Yeah.
just what I did, and you know, like one of the differences between masculine and feminine energy, right? So masculine energy, men grow through challenge,
Mm-hmm.
where generally women grow through praise. And I think that there's just a lot of pressure to be like, right, a lot of, there's a lot of praise given by saying, by climbing up that corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And women like that praise. And I think there's a lot of attraction to that.
Women like what?
And
I'm sorry. That last
praise.
statement. Praise. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. And I've heard women say that, and read women who have said that one of the issues that they find with being home is that they don't get the praise from their husband or from their child about how good of a mother they are, or how good of a wife they are. And at least at work, they get the praise about how good of a worker they are. And so that is a major issue as to why women can feel like being a housewife isn't fulfilling, because they just don't get the praise, as you said, from their husband that they need.
And that's exactly why I put like expectations for a good husband is to make sure their wives feel um, that that they feel that there's sincere gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
right, for what they do, right? Exactly. Like when you think about, I mean, I'm not a woman, right? But from a woman's perspective, like it just is common sense where it would be completely miserable, right? So if she's at home, let's just say she's in a traditional marriage. You have a husband who's not showing gratitude, who's not giving her experiences of that are exciting and interesting, that isn't leading. It's like, well, there's no emotional, the emotional tank is almost empty. So like, well, and plus everyone telling me like, go work and
Yeah,
how
exactly.
great that is. And women are going to stand up and applause. And like, so I'll go do that. Like it's common, or it makes a lot of sense to
Mm-hmm.
me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just a believer that, right, the dynamics of masculine and feminine go hand in hand. So the weaker we have men, the poorer our women are,
Mm-hmm.
the poorer condition that they're in, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that someone said, when we just put up that this was going to happen, then they were questioning, well, what is traditional marriage? And they said that a more traditional marriage would involve familial support, would involve the extended family. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, that maybe our definition of traditional marriage isn't starting far back enough or isn't wide enough, that familial support is also an issue. with why our marriages fail. You know, a lot of them fail in our time.
So I'm not following. So like, where extended families like help out financially? Is that what the?
No, I think I don't know quite what they meant, but I'm thinking more of emotional support
Mm,
for those, you know, because one thing I can say that one thing I've thought about with modern marriages is that it is solely based on love. It is solely based on the relationship of those two people. And so there's a lot less at stake when you get a divorce. You know, I think for the most part, if
mm,
someone is going to divorce in our time, people will tell them, well, if that's what you want to do, if you think that's the right decision. Whereas maybe in a marriage where there is more familial support, there would be more of an investment in that marriage and more of an investment in that working out. And I think this person was saying that that is also part of traditional marriage, of having a traditional marriage.
mm. That's interesting. So like, being a non-Muslim or being raised in kind of standard America culture, that to your point, like getting married is a man and woman getting together, and then they go off and move off and have kids and do whatever.
Yeah.
And being a Muslim and being married to Muslim women and just seeing it with friends is that it's not just a man and woman getting married, it's a merger of families. And there's some pros and cons to that. Like,
Hmm.
right, I hear a lot of, alhamdulillah, it wasn't a situation in my case, but I hear time and time and time again about these stories about how the parents or the in-laws are meddling and they're too close, and
Yeah,
so there's
very true. Yeah.
yeah. So that's not been my firsthand experience. So um, take it as what you will, but I think there is something to be said about having extended families. Like it's harder to divorce, obviously, when it's a merger of families, right? When they're
Hmm.
um, right, and like in the Quran, we already talk about how when there's a problem, bring someone from both sides of the family and have them try to resolve it and
Right.
whatnot. And we
Yeah.
and today, right, we that role is up to the marriage counselors,
Yeah.
and right, or to the moms at the local mosque. Some are very qualified, some are not qualified,
Hmm.
and and quite frankly, there's some qualified marriage counselors and some unqualified marriage counselors out there,
Yeah.
and uh, yeah, so it, I don't have I'd say that's a dynamic. I haven't thought through on how that totally plays out in traditional versus modern, having that extra support there.
Yeah.
But it certainly is a dynamic. And it wasn't on this video, but in your last video, you talked about how like we live in this America, it's such this society of independence,
Yeah.
and and everyone has to figure it out on their own, reinvent the wheel, pay for everything, everything, and right. It's even traditional modern relationships aside, it's just very difficult for people to have successful, right, just to be successful themselves, and then you add the complexity of a relationship, and it's like you have to have a good relationship, you have to have a quality man, and you have to have a quality woman,
Yeah.
and it's hard nowadays to do that. We don't know what that is, and we're trying to figure that out. And we don't, and our family doesn't know. Like you're saying, like there's a lot of women that are confused on what they're supposed to do.
Hmm.
Um, so, and it's great to hear because I know as a guy, and a lot of guys, there's no talk about women are confused. It seems very clear what women want.
That's funny. You
Yeah.
know, I think if you listen to women long enough and sort of the general discourse that women are having, you can kind of see that maybe confused isn't the right word, but conflicted, possibly, because there's the typical sort of conversation like among non-Muslims about should the guy pay for the first date or not, right? And so if women were completely if women were completely of this mindset that no, we're completely equal, this wouldn't even be a conversation anymore. This would be a dead conversation. But I think the fact that it is such a conversation that still comes up in our society says that women are conflicted about how much equality they actually want and when they would rather a man be a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. So tip to guys, if there's guys listening to this right now, pay for the first date. Don't send her a text the next day with a lot of emojis with hearts and angels and smiley faces.
Quick advice. So yeah, I just had a couple other questions that I had written down. So I'll just quickly, let's see. Oh, I wanted to, maybe we could briefly discuss if ease of divorce is also an issue. I mean, in some ways for Muslims, then divorce is easy, without it having to become easy in the American system. So I don't know. Let's focus uniquely on
What? Yeah.
America.
What's the context?
Yeah.
Like easy, like in the United States.
Yeah, in the United States it's gotten easier, but then I think there's also
Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on.
yes. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
there is nothing. 1,000% no. There is nothing easy about getting divorced in the United States of America. Like
Hmm.
in it, not even close. Like in the so like in Virginia, for example, like if you like first of all, if you're getting divorced, brass tacks most of the time, like if you're getting divorced, like it's been hell already. Okay,
Mhm.
so now you have to go through the court system, right, to get divorced if you can't figure out, like especially if you've got in Virginia, I think it's if you don't have kids, you have to wait 6 months. In Maryland, you have to wait a year. If
Oh,
you
interesting.
in dude, or I should say dude, yeah. Like in Virginia, if you have a kid, you have to wait 1 year. And
Okay.
in my case, because it was a little complicated, I had to wait 2 years from the time that I separated, right?
Hmm.
And in Maryland, I believe you have to wait 2 years. I think I believe it's 2 years if you have children. And so, like, if you, like, I don't know if you've talked a lot of ex-husbands, ex-wives, like, they usually, most of the time, do not like each other.
Hmm.
Like, especially if they've got kids. It's like there is so much at risk. There's emotionally, financially,
Hmm.
reputation, etc. Like there is so much at risk for such a long time, and obviously it's emotional and whatnot. And you have to put them in the same room with constant conflict with their kids and do that for 2 years. And you're telling me that's easy?
Mm.
No, no,
Okay. I'm mistaken. It's not easy.
no.
Okay, it is not easy to get a divorce. No, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's. I mean, my mindset changed a little bit, but I used to think if it's so hard to get out of a marriage, maybe it should be harder to get into a marriage.
Hmm. Right. It's
And
easier.
I'm a big advocate of going through premarital counseling, right? Like all things is good, you guys are happy. Like I remember going through one of the times I was going through marriage counseling, someone was like, "Well, the problem is you're going it too late. Like it's like if you're getting diagnosed with cancer, and it's at stage 5, you know, it's going to be very difficult to rectify. Where if you caught it much earlier, it would have been better." So I'm a big advocate of, while things are great and you're courting or talking before marriage, like, everything is great, alhamdulillah, but you do premarital counseling to see where your strengths and weaknesses are, where her strengths and weaknesses are, and see if it's a match.
Hmm. No, alhamdulillah. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And I think, I mean, this would be a whole other conversation, but I think for Muslims, and maybe it depends on the community, that there is this kind of difficulty people have with the idea of having a long courtship. A lot of people feel like it's not proper, it's not really Islamic if you're talking to someone for too long. But then, as you said, there are so many divorces in our community, so something is going wrong, and maybe the premarital counseling would help. So I mean that's another issue, but yeah, it's a good point. Um,
Yeah,
one other thing,
that is a whole separate conversation.
yes, for
Yes.
sure. One other thing I wanted to mention, and then we can go to the comments. That I guess I kind of mentioned already, but this idea of the freedom that people have outside of marriage versus the restrictions in marriage, or maybe even the restrictions within a traditional marriage. That how do you really not that you're trying to, but how do you sell people on traditional marriage when it feels like the roles are more restrictive so that they're losing a lot more freedom than they might have had pre-marriage?
Can you give me an example of lack of
Okay.
freedom?
Um, okay, in a traditional marriage, the man is the leader, so he gets to say where they're going to live or when or if they get to take a vacation or something like that. And the woman is used to living where she wants and traveling where she wants. So how would that look appealing to a woman who is used to that kind of freedom? How would traditional marriage look appealing to her? If that makes sense.
Okay. So let me get this straight, right? So we have a guy who is like, right, so they met, he's like, yeah, I want to be the leader, I want to do this, and she is like, well, I've always been working and doing things single and doing my own thing, and I agree that I'll change and you can do that, and I'll play more of a role and you take a leader role. Is that what we're talking about?
Right. Why would she want to do that? Actually, there's a comment
Um,
here where this brother he says single people can do anything married people can do, and the opposite is not true.
the the opposite of what's not true? I missed that.
He said single people can do anything married people can do, but the opposite is not true.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, first of all, like, so as Muslims, right? Like, so as married, you can have sex. Okay, you can't do that if you're single, if you're a practicing Muslim, right? So
Yeah, hopefully.
I would disagree with that. So yeah, there's no question that so even if you take an analogy like a team, like I've started companies, and so like when I'm just by myself, it's a lot easier. And then when I hire people, it gets more complex. But the idea of like the idea of marriage traditionally hasn't been an institution of control, right? It's been an institution because life is hard,
Hmm.
and you need to have more to have someone to support each other, right? Like on a basketball team, you've got 5 people on a team. They play much better when they're playing as a team versus they're just 5 individuals out there. And so it's true with marriage. Like there's a lot of benefits of marriage. It's just not about I can't what I can't do. No, there's obviously there's cons if you're a very independent person, but uh, there's great benefits of marriage. So I anyway, coming back to that, like I don't know if I agree that it's this like superset that like marriage is just worse than being single. Like I don't agree with that assumption.
Okay. Yeah, I don't agree either. I guess I want to really try to think about what are the benefits people see in modern marriage. And I would definitely say that's one that if a woman or a man, if you feel like within a more modern marriage you could have more freedom, that may look a lot more appealing. So
Yeah, but like when you say like freedom, like so your example about like well going on vacation.
yeah.
Well, like I mean, a husband can take a lead, but that doesn't mean dictate. Like just like with like any reasonable CEO, they're going to have people reporting into him, and he's going to get their input. Right now, he may lead. He may say, "Here's a direction. I want to go someplace where I want to go someplace to like let's say a Muslim country, so that we can learn about more about Islamic history." I'm just making that up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what do you think that we could do? Um, like, so that's not like control. Right.
Even that is unappealing to some people. They want to be able to just go. They don't want to, they don't want to have a conversation about it. They just want to.
So I mean, quite frankly, right? Like every couple is different, right? So it's hard to just say like, here's the one silver bullet. But like, I mean, like there's this one professional about relationships. But, one of the things that she said, one of the greatest ways to increase sexual polarity, sexual attraction, is don't see each other. Right? So like, maybe there's times, depending on the situation, that I agree that they're just not to, maybe they are together, right? Maybe he goes somewhere, maybe she goes somewhere, maybe, like we live in this, I'm going to take a step back for a second. I'll come back and answer this directly. But we live in a society where the man is supposed to be like her best friend, and when they first start the relationship, everything is different and everything is interesting. And what happens is they watch the same TV shows, they watch the same movies, they watch the same, they go to the same cookbooks, they go to the same parks,
Yeah.
they do everything the same, they go to the dinner the same place, they go to it's the same, the same, the same, and particularly for women, that becomes very like women like interesting, they like mysterious, right? Like that becomes very uninteresting. And so, you know, that's not to say that they have to do everything together. Actually, I would advise to do exactly the opposite. Like a man should have his life, a woman should have her life, and then they do some things together. Like it's unrealistic for a woman to fill every role that a man wants, and vice versa. It's unrealistic for a man to fill every role that a woman wants in her life. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so I'll say, yeah, everyone is different,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe they do some things different. But a man takes the lead. Like this is kind of to get her input. He handles the logistics. He handles things. He makes sure that she feels safe and secure. Provide interesting, exciting experiences like that.
Yeah, no. And so let's get to some comments, and then I know you have to go soon. So, okay.
Yeah.
Talia said, so he says a man rocking and rolling with his personal self will materialize the best relationships for him. And Nuruddin says the same for sisters. If we rock and roll in our lives, much goodness should materialize for us too. Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Agreed.
Brothers have to surround themselves with real striving, I guess, with other real striving men. Uh,
Agreed.
when men are not masculine, women are not feminine. At the end of the day, that means we are not in harmony with divine design.
100% agree with that.
Talia says, thank you, sir. Yes, sincere gratitude is appreciated, and helping out and not creating silly messes shows gratitude. Not making demands also shows gratitude, and helping out shows gratitude and love. All right. Let's see. Amir said, I think there are economic and social supports from the larger family, and that does come into play with traditional marriages. Okay. Um, Amir also said, when we look at even well-to-do families in other countries, the family resources are leveraged for the benefit of all and facilitate the buildup of wealth, and many of the needs of the families are met. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good point, but I guess it's like the likelihood of that happening in our society is I don't know, it's so low that, it's like, okay, that's great that it happens in other cultures, but um I think it's a lot harder to try to change the society or the community than to at least start with ourselves. Um, let's see.
Hey, Nordine,
Yes.
I got about a minute before I got to
Okay.
head out.
So sorry.
Yep.
Okay, I'll read this last one. Legal marriage and legal divorce is a barrier from premature marriages and premature divorces. I support them, and many imams have come to support and require them. Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining us. I think we all benefited from your wisdom, mashallah. And inshallah, we can do it again. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and thanks for having this podcast and doing this live feed.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you guys for joining us in your comments, especially Taulia, let's see, Jermaine, Amir. There were a couple of you that commented a couple times, and we appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.